You know how a certain song can instantly make you feel nostalgic? Or why you might automatically reach for your phone the moment you hear a specific notification? Well, today we're going to explore the science behind how we learn. We're breaking down two fundamental concepts that shape our behavior every single day: respondent and operant conditioning. So here's our game plan. We'll start with a really simple analogy to get us started, and then we'll dive into respondent and operant conditioning one at a time. After that, we'll put them side by side to really highlight the differences, and we'll finish up by looking at why this distinction is so incredibly important in the real world. All right, let's get into it. We'll start by looking at these two ways of learning through simple analogy. Okay, this comparison really gets to the core of it. On one side, think about a reflex. A doctor taps your knee and your leg just jerks out. You don't decide to do it, it just happens. That, right there, is the essence of respondent behavior. Now, on the other side, think about making a choice. You choose to kick a soccer ball towards a goal. Whether you kick it that way again really depends on what happens next. Did you score? That's operant conditioning. One is automatic, and the other is voluntary, shaped by what follows. Let's dig into our first concept, respondent conditioning. We can think of this as the automatic path to learning. So how does this automatic reflexive learning actually work? This is what we call respondent conditioning. You might also know it as classical conditioning. It's all about behavior that is elicited by something that happens before it. And that word, elicited, is absolutely crucial. It means the behavior is pulled out of you automatically. It's a reflex, not something you choose to do. The process behind this is what we call stimulus-stimulus pairing. And Pavlov's famous experiment is the perfect example. You have food, which naturally makes a dog salivate. If you ring a bell right before you give the dog food over and over again, the dog starts to associate that bell with the food. Pretty soon, just the sound of the bell itself is enough to make the dog salivate. That once neutral bell has now become a conditioned trigger. So the takeaway here is that respondent behavior is automatic. It's controlled entirely by the antecedent, the thing that comes right before it. It usually involves our internal systems, things like our glands producing saliva or our pupils dilating. And it's learned through that association, not because of any consequences that might follow. Now let's switch gears and explore the other path to learning, operant conditioning, which is all about consequences. So far, we've focused on what comes before a behavior, but what happens if we look at what comes after? Well, that brings us to operant conditioning. This is all about behavior that we omit, meaning we do it voluntarily with purpose. The key here is that what happens right after the behavior is what determines if we'll do it again in the future. We can break this down pretty neatly with the ABC model. First, you have the antecedent. That's the situation or the cue. Then comes the behavior, the actual action you take. And finally, you have the consequence, what happens immediately after your action. And it's that consequence that really holds all the power, making you more or less likely to repeat that behavior. These consequences generally fall into two main categories. They can either increase the odds of a behavior happening again, which we call reinforcement, or they can decrease the odds, which we call punishment. Let's just quickly touch on the two types of reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is when you add something desirable to make a behavior more likely. A great example is a child getting a sticker after they finish a task. That sticker makes it more probable that they'll finish their task again next time. Now, negative reinforcement also increases behavior, but it does it by removing something unpleasant. Think about a student who finishes their homework to avoid getting detention. The behavior, doing the homework, increases because it helps them escape an outcome they don't want. So to wrap up operant behavior, it's voluntary, it's purposeful, its future is dictated by its consequences. It typically involves the major muscle groups we use for actions like walking and talking, and it's learned entirely through that history of reinforcement and punishment. Okay, so we've looked at both of them on their own. Now, let's put them side by side to really drive home the key differences. This table lays it all out beautifully. Let's start with the behavior type. Respondent is involuntary, a reflex. Operant is voluntary and purposeful. What about the learning mechanism? Well, respondent works through that stimulus-stimulus pairing, while operant is all about the link between a behavior and its consequence. And that brings us to what's in control. For respondent behavior, it's the antecedent, what comes before. For operant behavior, it's the consequence, what comes after. This gives us those two key verbs. Respondent behavior is elicited, and operant behavior is emitted.
Now, understanding this difference isn't just an academic exercise. It has really critical real-world applications, especially in the field of applied behavior analysis.
In practice, we use respondent principles to understand and help with things like conditioned fears and anxiety, those automatic emotional reactions you can't just decide to turn off. Meanwhile, operant principles are really the foundation for most ABA strategies, helping us teach crucial skills like communication and also to address challenging behaviors. And this is really where it gets serious. If a professional mistakes an automatic fear response, which is respondent, for a voluntary defined behavior, which is operant, their whole approach will be off. You simply cannot reinforce or punish a reflex. Trying to do that isn't just ineffective, it can actually be harmful and get in the way of making real progress. So if there is one thing you take away from this explainer today, let it be the difference between elicited and emitted. Reflexes are elicited. They are pulled out of us by the environment. Voluntary actions are emitted. They are actions we put out into the world. The crucial question to ask is always this: is the behavior being controlled by what came before it or by what comes after? Answering that one question changes everything.